Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was the middle of the winter, and the snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky. And a queen sat at her window working, and her embroidery frame was of ebony. And as she worked, gazing at the towns out on the snow, she pricked her finger, and there fell from it 3 drops of blood on snow. And when she saw how bright and red it looked, she said to herself, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the embroidery frame." Not very long after she had the daughter with a skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair black as ebony, and she was named Snow White. And when she was born, the queen died. After the year had gone by, the king took another wife, a beautiful woman, but proud and overbearing, and she could not bear to see surpassed in beauty in by anyone. She had a magic looking glass, and she used to stand before it and look in it and say, looking the glass upon the wall, "Who is the fairest of us all?" And the looking glass would answer, "You are the fairest of them all." And she was content, for she knew that the looking glass told the truth. Now Snow White was growing prettier and prettier, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as day, far more than the queen herself. So one day, when the queen went to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who's the fairest of us all?" it answered, "Queen, you are full fair, 'tis true, but Snow White fairer is than you." The gave that This gave the queen a great shock, and she became yellow and green with envy. And from that hour, her heart turned against Snow White, and she hated her. And envy and pride, like ill weeds, grew in her heart higher every day, until she had no peace day or night. At the last, she sent for a huntsman and said, "Take the child out into the woods, so that I may set eyes on her no more. You must put her to death and bring me her heart for a token." The huntsman consented and led her away. But when he withdrew his cutlass to pierce Snow White's innocent heart, she began to weep and to say, "Oh, dear huntsman, do not take my life. I will go away into the wild wood and never come home again." And she was so lovely, the huntsman had pity on her and said, "Away with you then, poor child," for he thought the wild animals would be sure to devour her, and it was as if a stone had been rolled away from his heart. When he did not put her to death, just that moment a young wild boar came running by. So he caught it and killed it, and taking out its heart, he brought it to the queen for a token, and it was salted and cooked, and the wicked woman ate it up, thinking that there was an end to Snow White. Now, when the poor child found herself quite alone in the wildwood, she felt full of terror, even of the very leaves on the trees, and she said, "Not what to do for Then she began to run over the sharp stones and though the thorn bushes and the wild beasts after her, but they did not harm. She ran as long as her feet could carry her, but when the evening drew near, she came to a little house and she went inside to rest. Everything there was very small, but as pretty and clean as possible. There stood a little table ready laid and covered with white cloth, with seven little plates and seven knives and forks, and drinking cups. By the wall stood seven beds, and side by side, covered with clean white quilt. Snow White, being very hungry and thirsty, ate from each plate a little porridge and bread, and drank out of each cup a little drop of wine, as not to finish up one portion alone. After that, she felt so tired that she lay down on one of the beds, but it did not seem to suit her. One was too long, another too short, but at last the seventh was quite right, and so she lay down upon it and committed herself to heaven and fell asleep. When it was quite dark, the master of the house came home. They were seven dwarfs who occupation was to dig underground among the mountains. When they had lighted their seven candles, and it was quite light in the house, they saw that someone must have been in it, as everything was not in the same order in which they left it. The first said, "Who has been sitting in my little chair?" The second said, "Who has been eating from my little plate?" The third said, "Who has been taking my little loaf?" The fourth said, "Who has been tasting my porridge?" The fifth said, "Who has been using my little fork?" The sixth said, "Who has been cutting my little knife?" The seventh said, "Who had been drinking from my little cup?" Then the first one looked around, saw a hollow in his bed, and cried, "Who has been lying on my bed?" And the others came running and cried, "Someone has been to our beds too." But when the seventh looked at his bed, he saw a little Snow White lying there asleep. Then he told the others, who came running up, crying out in their astonishment and holding up their seven little candles to throw a light upon Snow White. "Oh, goodness gracious!" cried they. "What beautiful child is this?" And were so full of joy to see her that they did not wake her, but let her sleep on. And the seventh dwarf stood up with his comrades an hour at time with each until the night had passed. When it was morning, Snow White woke and saw the seven dwarfs. She was frightened, but they seemed very quiet and friendly. Asked her what her name was, and she told them, and then they asked how she came to be in the house. And she related to them how her stepmother had wished her to be put to death, and how the huntsman had spared her life, and how she had run the whole day long, until at last she had found their little house. Then the dove said, "If you will keep our house for us, and cook and wash and make beds and sew and knit and keep everything tidy and clean, you may stay with us, and you shall lack nothing." "With all my heart," said Snow White, and so she stayed and kept the house in good order. In the morning, the doves went to the mountain to dig for gold. In the evening, they came home, and their supper had been ready for them. All day long, the maiden was left alone and could little dolls warned her, saying, "Beware on your stepmother. She will soon know you are here. Let no one in the house." Now the queen had eaten Snow White's heart, as she supposed, felt quite sure that now she was the first and the fairest. And so she came to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who's the fairest of us all?" And the glass answered, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the seven little men is 1,000 times more fair." Then she was very angry, for the glass always spoke the truth, and she knew that the huntsman must have deceived her, and that Snow White must be living. And she thought and thought how she could manage to make the end of her, for as long she was not the fairest woman, so that no one would have known her. In disguise, she went across the seven mountains until she came to the house of the seven little dwarfs, and she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell, fine wares to sell." Snow White peeped out of the window and cried, good day, woman. What have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," answered she, "black of all colors." And she held up a piece that was woven of silk. "I need not be afraid of letting this good woman." Though Snow White and unbarred the door and bought the pretty lace. "What a figure you are, child," said the old woman. "Come and let me lace you properly for once." Snow White, suspecting nothing, stood up before her and let her lace with the new lace. But the old woman lay so quickly and tightly that it took Snow White's breath away, and she fell down as dead. "Now you have done with being the fairest," said the old woman, and she hastened away. Not long after that, towards evening, the seven dwarfs came home and were terrified to see their dear Snow White lying on the ground, without life nor motion. They raised her up, and when they saw how tightly she was laced, they cut the lace in two. Then she began to draw breath, and little by little she returned to life. When the dwarfs heard that what happened, they said, "The old peddler woman was no other than the wicked queen. You must beware of letting anyone in when we are not here." And when the wicked woman got home, she went to her glass and said, looking at the glass against the wall, "Who's the fairest of us all?" And it answered as before, "Queen, thou art beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the seven little men is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard, she was so struck with surprise that all the blood left her heart, for she knew Snow White must still be living. "But now," said she, "I'll think of something that will beat her ruin." And by witchcraft she made a poison foam. Then she dressed herself upon to look like another sort of old woman. So she went across the seven mountains and came to the house of the seven dwarfs and knocked the door and cried, "Good wares to sell, good wares to sell." Snow White looked out and said, "Go away, I must not let anybody in. But you are not forbidden to look," said the old woman, taking out the poison comb and holding it up. It pleased the poor child so much that she wasn't tempted to open the door. And when the bars was made, the old woman said, "Now for once your hair shall be properly combed." Poor Snow White, thinking no harm, let the old woman do as she would. But sooner was the home was in a the poison began to work, and the poor girl fell down senseless. Now, paragon of beauty, said the wicked woman, this is the end of you, and went off. By good luck, it was now near evening, and the seven little dogs came home. They saw Snow White lying on the ground as dead. They thought that it was the stepmother's doing, and looked about, found the poison foam, and no sooner they had drawn it out of her hair. Snow White came to herself and related all that had passed. They warned her once more to be on her guards, never let anyone in at the door. And the queen went home, stood before the looking glass, and said, looking glass against the wall, who's the fairest of us all? And the looking glass answered, Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with seven little men is 1,000 times more fair. She heard the looking glass speak thus, she trembled and shook with anger. Snow White shall die, cried she, though it should cost me my own life. And then she went secretly lonely chamber where no one was likely to come, and there she made a poisonous apple. It was beautiful and looked upon, giving white with red cheeks, so that anyone should see it must long for it. But whoever ate it, even a little bit of it must die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and clothed herself like a peasant woman and went across the seven mountains where the seven dwarfs lived. And she knocked at the door. Snow White put her head out of the window and said, I dare not let anybody in. The seven dwarfs told you not to. All right, answered the woman. I can easily get rid of my apple somewhere else. Then I will give you one. No, no, answered Snow White. I dare not take anything. Are you afraid of poison? Said the woman. Look here, I will cut the apple into two pieces and you shall have it at the red side. I will have the white one. For the apple was so cunningly made that all the poison was in the rosy half of it. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple, and as she saw the peasant woman eating a piece of it, she could not refrain but stretched her hand and took the poison half. But no sooner she had taken the morsel of it into her mouth, she fell to the earth as dead, and the queen, casting on her temples, laughed loud and proud. As she white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony, this time the dwarfs will not be able to bring you to life again. And when she went home and asked the looking glass against the wall who is the fairest of us all. At last it answered, You are fairest now of all. Then her envious heart had peace, as much as envious heart can have. The dogs, when they came home in the evening, find Snow White lying on the ground, and there came no bread out of her mouth, as she was dead. They lifted her up, sought if any poisonous was to be found, cut her legs, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine. But all was no avail. The poor child was dead and remained dead. When they laid on her bier, and sat all the seven doors around it and wept the lamentable days. And then they would have buried her, but she looked as still as if she was living with her beautiful blooming cheeks. So they said, We cannot hide her away in the background, and they made a coffin of clear glass so as to be looked into from all sides. And they laid her in it, and wrote in golden letters upon it her name, and she was a king's daughter. Then they set the coffin upon the mountains, and one of them remained by there to watch. And the birds came too, and the mound was Snow White. First an owl, then a raven, lastly a dove. Now, for a long while, Snow White lay in the coffin and never changed, but looked as she was asleep, for she was still as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair was black as ebony. It happened, however, that one day King's son rode through the wood upon the dwarf's house, which was near it. He saw the mountain, the coffin, and the beautiful Snow White with it, and there read what was written in the golden letters upon it. Then he said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you whatever you like to ask for it." But the dwarfs told him that they could not part with it for all the gold in the world. But he said, "I beseech you to give it to me, for I cannot live without looking upon Snow White. If you consent, I will bring you great honor and care for you if were my brethren." When he spoke, the good little dwarfs had pity upon him and gave the coffin, and the king's son called his servants and bid them carry away on his shoulders. Now it happened, as they were going around, stumbled upon a bush with shaking, the bit of poison apple flew out of her throat. It was not long before she opened her eyes, threw up the coffin, and sat up alive and well. "Oh dear, where am I?" she cried. The king's son answered, full of joy, "You are near me." And relating all that happened, he said, "I would rather have you anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle, and you shall be my bride." And the Snow White was kind and went with him, and their wedding was held pomp and great splendor. But Snow White, wicked stepmother, was also forbidden to feast, and when she has dressed herself in beautiful clothes, she went to her looking glass and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" The looking glass answered, "O queen, although you are the beauty rare, you the young bride is 1,000 times more fair." Then she railed and cursed, and beside herself with disappointment and anger. For she thought she would not go to the wedding, but then she felt she had no peace until she went and saw the bride. And when she saw her, knew her for Snow White, and could not stir from the place for anger and terror. For they